Hi guys, welcome back to Nico Talks Hockey. Today I want to talk again about fan bases, and more specifically, I want to talk about the pain, the suffering, the torment, and the torture that these fan bases, certain fan bases, have had to go through the years while watching the team that they cheer for. We're going to be ranking all of them on a tier list and ranking them based on how much they've had to suffer. And if you're a fan of a team that has not had as much success over the years, you will be higher up on this tier list. And if you're a fan of a team that just seems to win no matter what, they're always winning, they're always being successful as a team, then you're at the bottom of this list. And then everyone else, you're somewhere in between. But without further ado, I want to get right into it here. So we have 32 teams to go through. So I'm going to move over here so we can put the tier list right over here. So let's get right into it. So I'm going to start at the bottom, and I want to preface all this by saying that I am including the entire history of your franchise's history. It's not just recently, but it is definitely an emphasis on the recently. I would say since the turn of the century, I would say that's where it is more of an emphasis, because you've got a lot of people and a lot of eyes watching. More recently, I would say. You've got more people than ever watching the sport. So I want to put more of an emphasis on the success and or failures of the recent. So, but I do include the whole history. So Montreal Canadiens. I'm not going to tell you where you are right now if you're a fan of the Montreal Canadiens, but while you do have the most cups in the NHL and the NHL history, they're not going to matter so much when it comes to how much you're suffering or not suffering as a fan. So let's get right into it. So at the bottom here, I've got the what like it's hard tier. So I want to explain every tier as I go along. So the what like it's hard tier, these are the blessed franchises and fan bases. There's lots of winning. There's lots of smiles. Their worst seasons are other teams' best seasons, and everyone else hates them out of jealousy. There's not too many teams actually in this tier. There's only two actually that I've put here in this tier because these teams don't know pain. They don't know the word. It's not in their dictionary. So, and it's not in their vocabulary. So to start off, I've got the two teams. It's the Vegas Golden Knights and the Tampa Bay Lightning. So the Knights, there's not really much to say about why they are in here. If you're a hockey fan, you know exactly why they're here. If you're a Knights fan, you agree because they've been good since they've come into the league. They've been in the league now 7 years. They've missed the playoffs only one of those years. They have a Stanley Cup already to their name. If you are a fan of this team, then you are so blessed. You know nothing but success, and you always get also the great players that are on the market that seem to be available. They always go big name hunting, and these Knights get everything they want. It's the equivalent of a spoiled child. But again, we're all jealous. We're all jealous of United fans, along with the Lightning fans. If you're a Lightning fan, I attempted to put them in one tier above just because, they're not on the level of success that the Knights have just so early on in their history, right? But the Lightning, they went to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals. They've won 2 cups. They have 3 in their history. And it's not like they're a team that has struggled a lot throughout their history. They've been pretty much always competitive. They have one of the best front offices in the entire league. They've just always known to be good. I know they had that one year where they got swept against the Columbus Blue Jackets. If that was it, if that was the end of that was the end of that current core of the Lightning, absolutely they'd be way higher up this tier list. But that's not what happened. They ended up winning 2 Stanley Cups. I'm putting you here, Lightning. Moving on to the everything's coming up Millhouse tier. We gotta get through this. I'll be a little bit more brief on these explanations for these teams. So this tier, to explain a little bit, sure, they've had some rough patches here and there, but nothing that ruined their psyche, right? They've had plenty of success, and most importantly, a normal, functional relationship with hockey. This may be the most healthy tier to be in, I think, because you are not expecting winning all the time, but when you get it, you get it more often than not. And yeah, it's just a really nice tier to be in, I think, if you're a fan of one of these teams. So the teams in here, we've got the Panthers, right? That makes sense. I didn't put them at the bottom tier just because they have had rough patches throughout their history. There was a time where maybe people thought that they would relocate because they had so little attendance and all that. They've had some rough patches for sure. It's just recently they've had so much success. So I thought to balance that out, put them right here, and everything's coming up Millhouse tier. Moving on to the Avalanche, they're in here. The Avalanche, they don't have too many cups to their name. By my count, it's 2. I could be totally wrong. I do not actually know if it's more than that. It's 2 or 3, I think. But yeah, so it's not like the most cups, but there's teams on here. You got to remember, there's like 9 or 10 teams here that don't have a single Stanley Cup to their name. So that, yeah, you gotta remember that when you're kind of you're the context of it all, and if you have a Stanley Cup, even just one, you're doing better than a lot of teams. So fans of Avalanche, I think, are very chill in terms of just how they're happy with how their team performs. Yes, they've had some dark years, but that afforded them to get to rebuild and get McKinnon, and they have the second best player in all of hockey now, on planet Earth, and they've won a Stanley Cup. They might win another one this year. So I think it's fair to put them here. I've also put the 2 of the most successful teams during the 2010s, the Pittsburgh Penguins and my Chicago Blackhawks here in this tier. Just because of how much success they've had recently, Blackhawks are a original 6 team, and they've had more cups. They have 6 cups to their name. If you're a fan of the Hawks, yes, there's been dark times. Absolutely. The past 10 years have kind of been dark times for the Hawks. There's the off-ice stuff. And then, there's the dark days when the father of Rocky Warts wouldn't let him be on TV. So there's definitely some dark times, but the winning the cups changes all of that. And, to win as many cups as the Hawks have and the Penguins have now, Penguins have been through some dark times. There was some talk about relocation there for Pittsburgh. They won the cups. You have a franchise player in Crosby, you have a franchise player in Lemieux. Yeah, I have to put you here. You can't go any higher. You have been through some suffering, but not that much. And then the last team in this tier, this is really hard to rank, but it's the Mammoth, the Utah Mammoth. I decided to put them here just because they're so new. I didn't want to put them in the bottom because I am factoring in a little bit that some of the fans for Utah Mammoth are old Arizona Coyotes fans, and they were through a lot of torment and pain. So yeah, factoring that in, I think it's kind of fair to put Utah Mammoth in here. They also have a really nice future ahead of them, it seems, right? So moving on to the next tier, we've got that could be worse, could be a lot better too. This is, to explain this tier, the trauma really starts to grow in this tier, right? Fan bases in this tier have experienced some success. There's some teams in here that do have cups, but there's enough heartbreak to mess them up mentally as well. So they live in permanent cautious optimism, I would say. It's not the most healthy relationship with hockey. So there's a lot of teams. There's the most teams out of any other tier. It's kind of how the tier lists usually work, right? So I'm going to go through them really quick. The Bruins are in here. The Bruins, they do have cups to their name, but some people may have them lower just because they are always good. But the amount of cups is actually not too much, especially in the turn of the 21st century. So they've only got that one back in 2011 in the past 25 years. So although they are always pretty much good, and you can count on them to always be a hardworking team, and it's Bruins hockey, they also have a lot of crushing defeats. Game 7 comes to mind of 2019 against the Blues. There's pain, but there's also some success there. The Blues, to mention them, they are also in this tier. I want to say really quickly that the teams in this tier list, like in each tier, I haven't really ranked them in each tier. It's not really ranked within each tier who experiences more pain, except for maybe the top tier. When we get to the top tier, that's when we maybe get to maybe ranked by a little bit of more pain than the next team. But the Blues, they do have that cup, and that really helps. But they've also been a very steady organization. I think they've done business well, and they've remained competitive even when they don't go far in the playoffs. But having that one Stanley Cup win, and a beautiful, glorious Stanley Cup win, that being the worst team by Christmas, and then it's just such a storybook ending to that season for them. So I had to put them here. If they didn't win that Stanley Cup, I would have them at least one tier higher. Moving on to the Capitals and the Kings, I've got two other teams here. Capitals, they've got the Stanley Cup. They also are a very good organization. They run things very well. They've got a tight ship there. They're always competitive. You've got a franchise player in Ovechkin. How much can you have pain? That being said, though, all those years losing the second round of the Pittsburgh Penguins must have hurt. The Kings, they have. I debated putting them into the everything's coming up Millhouse tier, the one below, but they have the two Stanley Cups, but I also think they've experienced some pain. It's kind of feast or famine for LA. You're either winning the cups or you're not doing that well. So I thought it was pretty fair to put them right in the middle. Moving on to the Red Wings. If you're a Red Wings fan, this was also tough because you've got so many cups to your name as well. But recently, it's been really rough. Now, if you're watching in the 90s, the beginning of the 2000s, you're probably not suffering that much if you got to see those cups. But I know there's a lot of fans who haven't. The Red Wings, I believe, 10 years now, going on 10 years, they have not been in the playoffs. There's a lot of suffering here. So I thought that to even out all those cups, but because of the recency of them really suffering, I think if you're a fan of the Red Wings, it could be worse. It could be worse, but it could be a lot better too, which is the namesake of this tier. Moving on to the Hurricanes. If you're a Hurricanes fan, you're always competitive, right? You're one of the top-notch organizations in terms of, analytics and kind of cutting edge and doing innovative stuff, and you do have a cup to your name. So I kind of was like, if you've got at least one cup to your name, I think you belong in this tier. It's the teams that don't have a Stanley Cup yet, and especially if they've been around for a long time, you're pretty high up on this tier list. But Hurricanes, you've got a cup, and you're really consistent year over year. There's a lot of heartbreak in not getting it and not finishing the job the past few years, but I still think it's fair to put the Hurricanes here. The Devils, kind of like the Red Wings, they've got, I believe, 3 Stanley Cups to their name. They won it all in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. I think they got one in the early 2000s. The Devils, but then they went through some really hard times, somewhat recently. Yes, they've got Jack Hughes. Yes, they look like a really good team now. Yes, they could potentially win a Stanley Cup this season and maybe become a super team. But there's been, I think, equally as bad moments as there has been good moments. If I were to rank tiers by within each tier, where are the teams? Where are they higher up? I guess the Devils would be as high as you could be in terms of, or maybe as low as you be. As close to doing a little bit better than some of these other teams on this tier because they have 3 cups and they were won within the last 30 years. But still, I think it's fair. I think it's a fair placement. Let's finish up this tier really quick. I've got 3 more teams in this tier. It's a lot. There's 10 teams in this tier, actually. I've got the Stars. They've got a Stanley Cup to their name. They're a very good organization. They've got one of the best young talent. They got a great GM. They've got some of the best young talent on their team and in their pipeline. It's a really good place right now to be a Stars fan. It hasn't always been this way. It's been kind of middling, and that's kind of what this tier is, the middle tier. So I think it's fair to put the Stars. If you're a Stars fan, I think you probably would agree that you'd be here. And then along with the Sharks and the Kraken, the Sharks do not have a Stanley Cup. The Sharks, however, are a really good organization, and they were competitive for a really long time. I nearly put them in the next tier above, but I do believe because the times are so promising with the Sharks, they look like they're maybe a year away from exiting this rebuild. It's so promising, and you were just so close that one year to win the Stanley Cup. You have so many franchise legends like Marlowe and Thornton. I decided to put you here. But let me know if you're a fan of the Sharks in the comments if you disagree with that placement. And then lastly in this tier, I said the Seattle Kraken, a hard one to put. I decided that they're not kind of the same team as the Mammoth, even though they're both the 2 newest franchises. I think the Kraken have suffered a little bit more. They are in true no man's land right now. I know they've had a really good start to the season, but again, it's very early. So for me, it's like the Kraken need to start winning more before I can be a little bit more comfortable. Yes, they haven't. It's been so, they've been around for what, 4 years, 5 years. So yeah, they don't have a lot of suffering, but the years they've been in the league, they've made the playoffs. I want to say once. I want to say once. I could be wrong, maybe twice. But yeah, so not a lot of great times either for the Kraken. Moving on to the next tier, we've got the tortured fan base department. So if you are in this tier, it's not quite apocalyptic. It is not the top tier, but you're definitely traumatized if you're a fan of one of these teams. You've got a few good times, but a vast majority of not so good times, right? These fans, if you're a fan of one of these teams, you are constantly probably asking yourself why you put up with this team every year. You put up through with your favorite team every year because they mostly bring you just heartbreak and pain. So let's get into it. So I've got the Rangers here. I know their original 16. They have not won a cup in a while, and they had the least amount of cups of the original 6 teams. They are usually quite good. They're usually quite competitive, but they're also a team that I would imagine it's quite maddening to be a Rangers fan because you feel like you're so close and yet so far all the time. So this is more of a vibe that I got. You can, if you're a Rangers fan in the comments, please tell me if I got this one wrong a little bit, but I thought it was quite fair. I think that Rangers fans have been through a lot of pain. Canadians, the Montreal Canadiens are also here. They do have so many cups. So you might look at this and be like, that's stupid. You know, they have, what is it, 23, 26 maybe? 26 cups? I don't know the exact number. Tell me in the comments how many cups, the Stanley Cups the Montreal Canadiens have. But the last one was 1993. It was over 30 years ago. Yeah, that's relevant, and that's well, it's not relevant. The Stanley Cups are not that relevant, right? So yes, you're very successful. That's why you're not in the top, right? I'm sure there's lots of Canadiens fans out there that have watched the most recent cup, but there's been a lot of heartbreak and a lot of like bad teams, like teams that are so close, and then also teams that are like just bad, just really bad teams that you're going through rebuilds and all that. You got Carey Price, that was awesome. But yeah, you've had quite a lot of heartbreak, Canadiens fans, and let's hope that the come up is now. It's certainly looking like it. Maybe this team becomes the first Canadian team to win a Stanley Cup in 32 years. Moving on to the Oilers, another Canadian team. Yes, you have Gretzky. Yes, you have McDavid and Draisaitl. You also have a really bad front office most of the time. You know, like you were blessed with the gods of hockey. You were also cursed with some of the worst front office decision makers of all time. McDavid should have like 2 or 3 cups already, and he doesn't. He has 0. I do think he'll get some with the Oilers, but yeah, I had to kind of balance. And there were some really bad years. If you're an Oilers fan, you know some of the bad years of tanking and trying to and getting Nugent Hopkins and getting Nail Yakupov and getting McDavid and getting Draisaitl. So there's so many years of like, you know, just being bad and getting these prospects. And yes, you're at the top. You're right there. You're right about to win a Stanley Cup, but you haven't done it yet with this core. So yeah, I think it's fair to put you here. You've definitely had a lot of heartbreak and pain. Moving on to the Predators. Yeah, you're a team that, if you're a fan of the Predators, I thought it was maybe a little bit more painful to be a Predators fan than a Sharks fan, even though I kind of think of them together because they were both Stanley Cup finalists in the late 2010s against the Penguins, the exact same team. You both lost in a heartbreaking fashion, but I do think that the Predators are in obviously a much worse spot right now, just very currently, than the Sharks. You know, they're not as loaded in the prospect pool at all, and in terms of related to the Sharks. You're in a very weird spot. You don't really know what direction you're going. And I don't think the consistency's been there like the Sharks maybe was. But again, feel free to tell me I'm wrong in the comments. I just wanted to give some credit to Predators fans that have been feeling not so great, and I want you to know that I see your pain. Ducks fans, you do have a cup to your name. That being said, you've been rebuilding for a very long time. Your last cup was 2008, so a bit ago, nearly 2 decades ago. So yeah, you only got the one cup. So I think that this is fair placement. I think that if you're a Duck fan, you're waiting on these good times, and I think they're finally starting to come. This Ducks team looks awesome. This, led by Joel Quenneville and Pat Verbeek's moves, and this is a young, fast, really fun to watch team. So maybe in the next 10 years, maybe these Ducks are a lot lower on this tier list. If you're a Flames fan, I think you belong in this tier because you do have that one Stanley Cup to your name. It's been a long time since the Calgary Flames though won that Stanley Cup, and there's been a lot of middling to bad years for the Flames. In recent years, you've been looked as kind of like the little brother in the whole Oilers Flames rivalry. That can't feel good. I think there's a lot of pain there if you're a Flames fan. Losing Kachuk and Gaudreau when they left the team, that must have been like the worst feeling. And knowing that Huberdeau never became what you were hoping he would be with your team. So yeah, I think Flames fans have been through a lot. Here's to hoping that you guys get Gavin McKenna. And then two more teams in this tier. I've got the New York Islanders. New York Islanders, I think, belong in this tier. You do have a stretch of 4 Stanley Cups. So, yes, that's crazy, but it was a long time ago, multiple decades ago. So, I think with the recency, losing in back-to-back years in the Final Four to the same team, the Tampa Bay Lightning, must have been so painful to watch and heartbreaking. So, this team, I mean, it seems like it's going the right direction now. It seems like you guys are building up again your prospect pool and getting younger, which is a really smart move. And hopefully there's better days for you guys, for your Islanders, especially. Oh, I didn't even mention the Tavares stuff. There's the Tavares stuff too. I don't need to say more. And then the Flyers, the last team in this tier. Flyers, you do have at least one Stanley Cup to your name, but you lost in the 2010 Stanley Cup final. I know that must have hurt. This team also, I think it's a solid organization, but it tends to not want to do the right things, I think, in order to build right back up. You guys value really, grit a lot, and that's something that's very respectable. But also, I think that sometimes maybe you don't tank when you need to tank, and it's like this, it results in the kind of this very middling team that doesn't really go anywhere. So I think there's a lot of not so great vibes sometimes in Philadelphia. I'm hoping there's some good vibes here now with Michkov and Zegras is popping off, and Konecny's an awesome player. So hoping the good vibes continue for Flyers. But we move on to the final tier here. The final tier, which is the "Why are we here? Just to suffer" tier. The description for this tier is that pain is eternal. If you're in this tier, you've been suffering as a fan for as long as you can remember. You have generational heartbreak, cursed timelines, and the disappointment is annual. You watch hockey the way others watch true crime documentaries. Humor is about the only thing that helps ease the pain. So there are 7 teams in here. I originally only had a few, but then I just thought about how much heartbreak some of these teams have had to go through and how little success. We're going to start with the Wild. So they're not the most in pain fan base here. But if you're a fan of the Minnesota Wild, there's so much disappointment. You're supposed to be the state of hockey, and yet you, I believe, have never reached the Stanley Cup final. You've reached the Final Four, I think, like once. It's just not good enough. And as a fan, I know that you believe that it's not good enough. So, I feel for you, Wild fans, because I cheer for you as a team. I don't like that you're in my favorite team's division, but I really do want to see a Stanley Cup brought to Minnesota one day, and hopefully one day soon. The Winnipeg Jets are a team here that technically in their current form has never won a Stanley Cup. I don't believe ever. I didn't actually brush up too much on my knowledge of every Stanley Cup ever here, but I don't believe that Winnipeg Jets have a Stanley Cup to their name, so that really sucks. You never have a Stanley Cup, and I don't believe you've ever been to the finals along with the Wild. You're quite similar actually in that regard, and you've had to deal with the Wild never have to deal with this, but you as a fan, you've had to put up with all these comments in the media saying like, maybe this is a team that's got to go. This is a team that's got to relocate. It's not, Winnipeg can't support an NHL team because of the low, I don't know, low revenue numbers. So that's also, I factored that into the pain scale. So I feel for you, Winnipeg Jets fans, you're another team that I also am rooting for to finally find success and potentially win a Stanley Cup soon. You've got a good core. You got to win now. Moving on to the Ottawa Senators, in your current form, you have also never won a Stanley Cup. And the heartbreak in 2017 against the Penguins, and then losing your whole core, and then being bad for so many years, and hoping you were exiting the rebuild and you weren't yet, and then changing owners, and there's so much pain. This was a no-brainer for me. I had to put Ottawa in here. If you're an Ottawa Senators fan, I'm so sorry. There's so much pain that you've had to go through, but I'm hoping that this is finally you're on the right track here, because you do have a good core. I think you finally have a good GM and a good owner who really cares about your team. There's 4 teams left here. We've got the Columbus Blue Jackets up. Blue Jackets, yeah, this is another no-brainer. You've never won a Stanley Cup. I don't know if you've even been to the Final Four. It's been mentioned before that you are the most irrelevant franchise. I wouldn't call you that, but that I think you know where maybe those comments come from, and of course you don't like it, right? It's painful to be thought of even as that way, or even not even thought of at all. You know that sucks. I really do feel for you, Blue Jackets fans. When I think about teams I root for in my fandoms, I root for the underdogs, and so I definitely root for the Blue Jackets. I really like these young players they're bringing in, but I just, in terms of pain, I know if you're a Blue Jackets fan, you've been through a lot. And I actually blame a lot of that to the owner. I think the owner is really bad. Moving on to the last 3 teams, though. These 3 teams I'm about to mention have had more pain than everybody. And it starts with the Vancouver Canucks. If you're a Vancouver Canucks fan, you do not have a Stanley Cup to your name. And you've been through so many promising teams that didn't get the job done and then had to rebuild. And that process has had start over and over and over again, and oh my gosh, yeah, the torture and the torment is never ending for you Canucks fans. I really, really hope that you guys get a Stanley Cup. As the hockey guy said, the YouTube channel, the hockey guy, he believes that the Canucks will never win a Stanley Cup in his lifetime. Please prove him wrong. Please win a Stanley Cup. Moving on to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto Maple Leafs. Yes, they have the second most Stanley Cups, but they have not won a Stanley Cup. It's not like the Canadiens, where they won in 93. They haven't won a Stanley Cup since 1967. So, yeah. They haven't won a Stanley Cup since before the moon landing. You can't really count a lot. I mean, yes, every Stanley Cup counts, but you don't count it when you're talking about a fan who's miserable right now. This team also looks really different this year in a bad way. So I'm hoping they can turn it around here. You've got lots of time still, but it's just, it's been a lot of, you build your hopes up just to have them dashed every single year. And it sucks for such a fervent and a fan base that cares so much about this team. But the last team, I had to put them number 1. This is if you are a fan of the Buffalo Sabres, you have been through more pain than anyone, in my opinion, because you do not have a Stanley Cup to your name. You, in 1999, you went against the Dallas Stars, and you believed that you should have had a Stanley Cup that year because of the horrible call that happened there, right? You have an owner that doesn't care about you at all. You have a horrible GM. It sucks year after year, 14 years and counting for the Buffalo Sabres that they have not made the playoffs. I will say one thing: you are so very loyal to this team because it takes a lot. I imagine it's a full-time job to be a Buffalo Sabres fan. But that has been the video. Thank you so much for watching. I wanted to rank today all these teams and all these fan bases in terms of how painful it is to be a fan of your favorite franchise and team. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know, please, in the comments how I did, if you did have any disagreements. I know it was a long video, but I wanted to give a little bit on each team and why maybe they'd be feeling a lot of pain or a lot of happiness because their teams are good or their teams are bad. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you guys in that next video.